So first, welcome. Thank you for joining Research Nova Scotia's information session for the new Investigator in Addictions and Mental Health Grant competition. Before we start this afternoon, I just want to begin by acknowledging that Research Nova Scotia is in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This land is governed by the treaties of peace and friendship that were struck in 1725 and 26 that have established a long-standing relationship between the nations. We are all treaty people. I also want to recognize that African Nova Scotians are distinct peoples whose histories, legacies, and contributions have enriched that part of Mi'kmaq, known as Nova Scotia, for over 400 years. My name is Magabelle Fontaine. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Director of Research Support here at Research Nova Scotia, and I'll be guiding you through today's materials. So before we start, just a couple of housekeeping items to go over. First, I'll ask that you enter any questions into the Q&A section that's found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can enter questions at any time during the presentation, and either myself or my colleague, Kelly Hancock and Kirsten Mosier, who are also on the line, will do our best to answer any questions as we go through, or there's a little bit of time set aside at the end of the webinar for questions. So second, I also wanted to note that today's webinar is being recorded, and it will be available along with copies of the webinar slides on the Research Nova Scotia website later this week. So with that, I'm going to turn off my camera to preserve a little bit of bandwidth, and we will get started. So today's webinar is going to cover a variety of topics, including a brief introduction to Research Nova Scotia, an overview of the new Investigator in Addictions and Mental Health Grant, the application and review processes for your expression of interest, which I might otherwise refer to as an EOI, and finally, as I mentioned, a short Q&A session. So Research Nova Scotia was founded in 2019 to support, organize, and coordinate research in our province. Our research strategy has been organized into 4 areas, which is improved quality of life for Nova Scotians, healthy people and healthcare systems, climate change adaptation and resilience, and sustainable bioeconomy. These areas represent some of the most pressing needs for the province. Each area is made up of 4 corresponding missions, which help to give shape to the ways research can contribute to achieving progress for Nova Scotia. This mission-oriented approach to research means we start with what we want to accomplish and build a research agenda and coalition of partners and projects to help achieve these goals. We seek to support creativity, diversity, and ingenuity in the research community's responses to our mission challenges. All submissions for the new Investigator in Addictions and Mental Health Grant must be aligned with the healthy people and health care systems mission area of our strategy, which will be demonstrated through alignment with the priority established for this competition. So as mentioned, Research Nova Scotia often works with partner agencies to develop opportunities to help us achieve our shared goals. The new Investigator in Addictions and Mental Health Grant is one of these kind of opportunities. Funding for the new Investigator in Addictions and Mental Health Grant is provided by the Nova Scotia Office of Addictions and Mental Health. Research Nova Scotia is mandated to support research that reflects provincial health research priorities. The priority established for this year's competition is mental health and addiction research that is focused on equity-deserving groups in Nova Scotia. Equity-deserving groups for the purposes of this competition are defined as, but are not limited to, Mi'kmaq Indigenous persons or communities, African Nova Scotians or persons of African descent, racialized persons, newcomers, persons with disabilities, the 2SL LGBTQIA+ community, Acadian Francophone individuals, residents of rural areas. All submissions to the new Investigator in Addictions and Mental Health Grant, EOI, must clearly address the priority listed here. The 2024-25 new Investigator in Addictions and Mental Health Grant supports early career health researchers who are engaged in mental health and addiction research that is focused on equity-deserving groups in Nova Scotia. This grant will provide up to $100,000 over 2 years for researchers who are within the first 5 years of a first-time academic appointment in Nova Scotia. Funding provided will support the establishment of independent programs of research, improve competitiveness for awards from national and other external funders, and expand the potential for early career investigators to make significant contributions in the field. As mentioned, funding for this grant is provided by the Nova Scotia Office of Addictions and Mental Health. We will now dive a little bit deeper into the eligibility criteria for this grant opportunity. First, to apply for a new Investigator in Addictions and Mental Health Grant, The applicant must be an early career health researcher within the first 5 years of a first-time academic or research appointment at a Nova Scotia university or college, or have an appointment with the research responsibilities at an affiliated hospital. It is important to note that the 5-year window is adjusted to account for instances where a researcher has had an eligible delay in research. Eligible leaves such as illness, maternity, parental, or bereavement are credited at twice the amount of time taken. Professional leaves, for example, training, sabbatical, or administrative leaves, are not credited. Second, the primary applicant must have an eligible academic or research appointment. I will go into this into more detail in the next slide. Third, during the full duration of the grant, the primary applicant must reside in Nova Scotia, work at a Nova Scotia institution, and maintain an eligible academic appointment. And finally, current establishment and/or new health investigator grant holders may be eligible to apply for this grant, provided that they would not hold both grants at the same time. For the purposes of the New Investigator in Addictions and Mental Health Grant, Research Nova Scotia considers the following to be academic appointments: tenured appointments, tenure track appointments, and probationary tenure track appointments, a research scientist, limited term appointments. I will, however, note that applicants with limited term appointments, while they are eligible to apply, if they are funded, the applicants will be asked to provide institutional confirmation that their term end date will be after the estimated grant completion date. And finally, any affiliated scientists, medical staff, or other appointments or affiliations approved by a senior official, for example, a CEO or a VP research. Adjunct and instructor positions are not considered to be academic appointments for the purpose of this funding opportunity. If you have specific questions regarding your eligibility, please contact Kirsten Mosier, our research support officer, at the email address found at the end of this presentation. So as noted, Research Nova Scotia is mandated to support research that reflects provincial health research priorities. The New Investigator in Addictions and Mental Health grant submissions must address this priority that was discussed earlier in the presentation. The New Investigator in Addictions and Mental Health grant holders may be awarded up to $100,000 for up to 2 years. It's also important to note that all grants are subject to a 10% financial holdback. So all EOI applications must be submitted through Research Nova Scotia's Jura system by 1 p.m. Atlantic time on Thursday, November 7th, 2024. Jura will not allow submissions that come in after this date and time, and any application not submitted by this date and time will be marked ineligible for consideration. We strongly recommend that you do not leave your submission to the last minute. Technical errors and computer shutdowns will absolutely occur at the worst possible moments, and unfortunately, exceptions cannot be made under any circumstances. The EOIs will undergo a first round of review, and we anticipate that invitations to submit a full application will go out in December of 2024. For anyone invited to submit a full application, the full application deadline will be on February 13th, 2025, once again at 1 p.m. Atlantic time. Final funding decisions will be available in April of 2025, and funding will be available to start in 2025 as well. So now the big question is, how do we apply for this award? The first step, as always, is to confirm your eligibility criteria. Be sure to review the criteria mentioned earlier in this presentation to ensure that you are eligible to receive and hold this award. Applicants who do not meet the eligibility criteria will be deemed ineligible and will not be able to move forward in the competition. The criteria can be found on the Research Nova Scotia website, in this slide deck, and embedded in the online application form. Again, if there are any questions regarding your eligibility, please contact Kirsten at the email address found at the end of this presentation. So next, once you know that you are eligible to apply, you'll want to reach out to your institution to confirm any internal deadlines. All EOI submissions must undergo institutional review and receive approval before they will be considered by Research Nova Scotia. Applicants must connect with their research office well in advance of the submission deadline to confirm any internal deadlines and processes. These deadlines are often several weeks in advance of the Research Nova Scotia deadline, so please be sure to reach out to the appropriate research office representative as soon as possible. So next, you must register for a Jura account. Jura is Research Nova Scotia's online grant management portal. All applications must be submitted through this portal. As a first step, you will navigate to Jura from the Research Nova Scotia website, select the For Researchers dropdown, and click on Jura Login. Once you reach the Jura homepage, you may log in using existing system credentials if you've already applied for a previous award, or if you're new to the system, you'll click the Register button to sign up. Once you're on the registration page, you would first need to look up your organization. This should be the organization at which you will hold the funding for this grant if you are successful in the competition. If you select the wrong organization at sign up, please reach out to our Jura help desk and we will be happy to help you resolve this issue. When you're entering the name of your organization, a drop-down box with all matching entries will appear. Be sure to select the entry from this pop-up box to properly associate your account with the organization. Next, you'll want to complete the contact information section. Please note that any sections marked with an asterisk are required. Finally, you will complete an equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility self-declaration. EDIA strengthen the research community and the quality, social relevance, and impact of research. EDIA-informed analyses, systems, and practices ensure barriers faced by underrepresented or disadvantaged groups are identified and addressed, which in turn enhances the integrity and application of selection processes, strengthens our research outputs, and increases the overall excellence of research. All information provided to Research Nova Scotia will be kept strictly confidential and will not be shared with third parties. If you do not wish to self-identify, you do have the option to select Prefer Not to Say for each question. You must select an option and save your responses for your questionnaire to be marked as complete. Doing so will fulfill the mandatory requirement for completing the EDIA self-declaration. You may change your answers to these questions at any time by following the instructions outlined in the How to Complete an EDIA Self-Declaration in Jura document on the New Investigator in Addictions and Mental Health landing page on the RNS website. Once all fields are complete, you'll click the Submit button to create your account in Jura. Shortly after submitting, you will receive an automated email from Smart Simple with a link to set your password. Once your password is set, you will need to agree to the Jura privacy policy and terms of use and will be redirected to your user homepage. As noted earlier in this presentation, the EDIA self-declaration is required of all applications. So users who do have an existing Jura account will first need to log into the system with their existing credentials, click on the Personal Profile tab, and then finally select Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Accessibility. As with the previous option for new users, if you do not wish to self-identify, you have the option to select Prefer Not to Say for each question. So now that you've registered and for Jura, you've completed your EDIA self-declaration, you can now start working on your application. From your Jura homepage, you will select the Funding Opportunities section. From here, select the New Investigator in Addictions and Mental Health Grant opportunity and click the Apply Now button to launch your application. Before you begin your application, you will need to click the Saved Draft button. This will assign you a unique application number in the system that will allow you to return to your application at any time. The guidelines for this opportunity can be found at the top of your application in Jura. Please make sure that you have read and understood the guidelines for this opportunity before completing your application. You can navigate to the various sections of your application using the tabs located at the top of your screen. Again, any questions marked with an asterisk are mandatory. I will also note that Jura does not automatically save your progress, so I absolutely recommend that you save draft frequently to avoid losing your work and also to enable you to return to your application at a later date. In any subsequent sessions, you can find your draft application in the In Progress Applications section of your Jura homepage. So as I mentioned, while working on your application, you must follow the guidelines for this opportunity. The detailed guidelines document can be found on the Research Nova Scotia website on the New Investigator in Addictions and Mental Health Grant landing page at the top of your application in Jura. This document provides you details of what is expected in each of the fields found in your Jura application. We strongly recommend that you take the time to read the guidelines thoroughly to set up your application for success. So while you're completing your application, there are a few areas where you may have some confusion. So I just want to spend a few moments of today's webinar to review these details. So first, we'll look at the plain language summary. The plain language summary should provide a clear and concise overview of the project written in language suitable for a non-scientific audience. When writing the summary, I want you to imagine that you're explaining your work to a stranger on the street who does not have any knowledge of the subject matter area. As such, whenever possible, we ask that you avoid using jargon, abbreviations, and technical terms. If you must use them, please provide a clear explanation. This summary should briefly describe the topic and issue to be researched, the overall objectives, the research question, how this work will benefit Nova Scotians, and the activities for which you are requesting funding. If funded, Research Nova Scotia will use the plain language summary for communication purposes. Next, we'll look at the CV submission. All primary applicants must submit an up-to-date, validated PDF version of a common CV in either CIHR academic or CIHR project biosketch type. We recommend that you start this process early, especially if you are new to the CCV system, as it can take some time to receive your PIN and enter all of the required information. Any questions related directly to the CCV system should be directed to the CIHR Centralized Help Desk at the contact information provided on this slide. And finally, we'll look at the project alignment description submission requirements. The project alignment description should be one of the main focuses of your EOI submission. This document must provide a clear and concise description of the proposed research project that includes demonstration of the project alignment with the research priority for this competition detailed earlier in the presentation. Your EOI submission will be reviewed by a committee comprised of representatives from the Office of Addictions and Mental Health. This committee will determine whether the proposed project topic aligns with the research priority. As such, applicants are reminded that the project alignment description should be written for a non-scientific and non-specialist audience. Once your application is complete and ready for submission, we recommend that you review the PDF overview that can be downloaded by clicking the EOI summary button. It is strongly recommended that you review this carefully before submission to ensure the information provided is accurate and appears correctly, as this is the version of the submission that will be provided to the review committee for consideration. Should you choose not to move forward in the competition, you may withdraw your application at any point before the deadline by clicking on the withdraw button. When your proposal is ready for submission, you will click the submit button at the bottom of your form. If successful, you'll receive a confirmation email and the submission will be viewable under the submitted applications section of your Jura main profile. However, if you try to submit your application without completing one of the mandatory fields, you will receive a submission failed message that will direct you to correct the information in your application. You must navigate to each section of your application and correct these errors. This may mean entering text into a field that you missed, uploading a document to the correct field, or you may receive an error message relating to your EDIA self-declaration. To resolve this error, again, you would click on the applicant home button, click on your personal profile, and then navigate to the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Accessibility tab. You'll need to complete the questions noted in your submission failure message. This may be regarding Indigenous identity, racialized minority group, disability, gender identity, language, or age cohort. As noted, you may choose to select prefer not to say for any or all of these categories. Once completed and saved, you will need to return to your application and try to submit again. We strongly encourage you to submit your applications as early as possible to ensure that technical errors such as these do not prevent the submission of your application on time. The final step in the EOI application process is obtaining your institutional approval. As noted, all submissions must receive institutional approval before the application deadline. And this process is completed by an institutional representative in Jura, and your institutional deadlines may differ from the Research Nova Scotia deadlines. Once you hit submit, your application will move into a submitted EOI pending validation status. This will prompt one of the institutional representatives to log into Jura and review your application. They may request changes to your submission before they will approve it for Research Nova Scotia's review, or they may just approve it in the system. Once your application is approved by your institution, it will move into a submitted EOI status. So once the Research Nova Scotia submission deadline has passed, the new Investigator in Addictions and Mental Health grant EOI review process starts with Research Nova Scotia's eligibility check. Staff will assess all applications to determine whether they are complete and meet the eligibility criteria for this opportunity. Applications that do not meet basic administrative eligibility criteria for the competition will be marked ineligible and not provided to the Office of Addictions and Mental Health Committee for consideration. Next, any eligible EOI submissions will be reviewed by a committee comprised of representatives from the Office of Addictions and Mental Health. This committee will determine whether the proposed project topic aligns with the research priority. And finally, Research Nova Scotia will notify applicants of all the EOI status decisions and will invite successful applicants to submit a full proposal for consideration. So hopefully this webinar has provided you with answers to most of your questions. However, I did want to take a few final moments to address a few of the frequently asked questions. So first, am I able to submit multiple proposals as the primary applicant? No, applicants may only submit one proposal as the primary or co-primary applicant. Applicants may, however, act as a co-investigator on multiple proposals. Second, do all primary applicants need to be an early career researcher? Yes. All primary and co-primary applicants must be within the first 5 years of a first-time academic or research appointment at a Nova Scotia university or college, or have an appointment with research responsibilities at an affiliated hospital. Third, am I able to include citations with my expression of interest submission? Yes, all applicants may include in-text citations in their project alignment description and should upload these citations in the attachments section of the application. Applicants should, however, keep in mind that the EOI submissions will be reviewed by a committee of government representatives and should be written for a non-scientific audience. As such, citations are not a required piece of the EOI submission. Next is for eligibility, how are leaves of absence calculated into the length of the academic appointment? For early career health researchers, eligible leaves will be considered at twice the amount of time taken. So we're wondering, how are the first 5 years calculated? The primary applicants must have been within their first 5 years or less, but sometime in, I think we said, we didn't actually update this, so it'll actually be between April 1st, 2024 and March 31st, 2025. So I just provided a few different examples here on this slide of how the eligibility period is calculated. So just for your reference, but if you do have specific questions about your eligibility, I strongly encourage you to reach out to Kirsten, because I know they can get quite complicated and it's best for us to just kind of take a look at your individual situation. So we have, I'm still a bit confused. Who do I contact for help? If you require support for your application, please do not hesitate to reach out to the appropriate contact person here. So for any technical issues related to your application summary, please go through our Jura help desk. If you're having some problems with the Canadian Common CV software, please reach out to CIHR, their centralized help desk. But for everything else, I really want to take a moment to highlight Kirsten's application contact information. It's been referenced a few times during this presentation, and she will be your best contact if you have specific questions.